Hi, I'm Jonathan Newman. Welcome to this next video in our series on literary theory. In this video, I'm going to take a step back from any specific theories and talk about what literary theory is in general, what all literary theories have in common, and what means we might have to compare them and think about the differences between theories and how they relate to each other, and how we use literary theory, why we should pay attention to it at all. Now, this is not a video for people who have a lot of sophisticated advanced study in this subject. This is meant to be an introduction, but if you are familiar with the stuff, hopefully you'll get something out of this too, or at least you'll be able to say, that guy's so wrong about so many things, and I'm going to tell him why. Bring it. This is my boy right here, Northrop Frye, from my alma mater at the University of Toronto. He's an important literary theorist from the mid-20th century. We'll have a video about his work in a few weeks down the line. Let's get going here, and let's talk first of all about what theory is. Theory comes from a Greek word, theoria. First appears in English in the 1590s, at a time when the English people are just, or when the Europeans are just raiding Greek and Latin for words so they could sound fancy. See my History of the English Language series. But anyway, theory comes from a root that's connected to looking at, viewing, a sight, a show, a spectacle. So you can think of it as a viewpoint, a way of framing things, a way of seeing things. This is a kind of a visual metaphor there. There's two kinds of ways in which we use theory in the modern world. One is natural science or scientific theory, and that is different than the way we use theory when we're talking about literary theory or critical theory. And so I'm just going to briefly talk about some of those differences here. Scientific theory is empirical and falsifiable. What this means is that it's based on data, things that can be observed in the world and measured. And the data is the measurement. It's not the phenomenon that the scientist observes. It's the record that they make of it, right? And so with that data, they then come up with theories that can explain what is producing these phenomenon, and that can predict that similar things will happen in the future. I have worked out that water will boil at 100 degrees Celsius. And based on my theory, I think it will continue to do that. It's objective, right? Doesn't matter who you are, where you are, and what you believe about anything else. Water's always going to boil at 100 degrees Celsius at sea level, blah, blah, blah. And it's also predictive, right? Scientific theory should be able to predict things in the way that, like, the theory of evolution predicts the development of antibiotic-resistant strains of bacteria. And the other thing, the term that I passed over here, which I want to go back to, is falsifiable. A scientific theory can be falsified. You can come up with a theory and you can fake data to support it. I can come up with a theory that, well, actually, water boils at 130 degrees Celsius, and then I could write up a whole bunch of fake lab reports. And if I convince people they're authentic, then they'll say, well, I guess we were wrong. I guess water boils at 130 degrees. Except the problem is that science is objective, so that other people can see, they can go and rerun the experiments and see that no, water does not boil at 130 degrees, no matter who says it does. So scientific theory is very valuable, it's very useful, but it has certain limits, right? We as human beings don't just live in a world of external perceptions and objective truths. We, to coin a phrase, live in a society. We live with each other, we share values, we share language, we produce art, we talk to each other, and we have to negotiate all these signs and symbols and practices that we're constantly throwing at each other. And so critical theory, and more specifically literary theory in the case of literature, is a way to think about how we do all this. Literary theory is therefore abstract and interpretive. It seeks to understand underlying principles, themes, and structures of human action, mostly human productivity, art. It develops methods and ideas used to analyze and interpret texts. And I'm actually making a theoretical move here by using the term text instead of work of art or literary work or novel. text is a broader term, and it's come in certain circles to refer to all human cultural artifacts that can be viewed as texts. And this is the influence of literary theory. We'll get to that when we get to structuralism, really. But this is just I just have an abstract painting by my Vasily Kandinsky here, just to give an example of the idea of abstraction. Kandinsky has taken the phenomenon of the world that we normally experience, the things we see, and has turned them into shapes and colors and patterns and stuff like that. So this kind of theory, in the sense, is also looking at the patterns and things and the shapes of things apart from their individual examples. Literary theory is also, unlike scientific theory, subjective. This means that it deals not just with things that can be observed independently by everyone in the world, but what it's like for a specific person in a specific kind of position and experience of the world to experience certain kinds of things. Different theories may offer varying interpretations of the same work of art or work of literature based on interests, values, commitments, or priorities. There is no single correct theory or interpretation. Subjectivity, however, is about how we experience the world as individuals. So even though it isn't objective, this does not mean it is without value. The fact that we all have our own perspective on things and our own framework, and that we all produce meaning in our encounter with the world, is worthy of our intellectual attention. It's worth us thinking about in a systematic and analytical and critical way. And so moving on to another aspect of literary theory as a subset of more broadly speaking critical theory, we can describe theory as being descriptive and analytical. Literary theories aim to describe and analyze how meaning is constructed in a text. Theory gives us categories and frameworks to describe things. If you, a teacher of mine, wonderful professor of mine, once said, "We all have theories," right? If you're saying, well, this is a different kind of song, this is a different kind of poem from that. Well, that's not a YA novel, that's a literary novel. There's a kind of theory, and maybe it's not a systematic and deeply thought through one, but you have a kind of framework through which you're organizing and thinking about what different types of literary works, how you value them, and what you expect from them, right? So theory, in this sense, then, tries to be more explicit and more thoughtful about how we make categories and how we assign evaluations. And it will look at how people assign evaluations to things, what makes something good, what makes something bad, right? Theory is interested not just in what is good and what is bad, but why specific people at specific times will say this is good or this is bad. For example, I might be interested in why Aristotle, who wrote the Poetics, a very early important work of literary theory, pictured here, translated in the Middle Ages into Arabic by Abu Bishr Mata, what was he doing here in terms of trying to figure out what is a tragedy, what are the parts of tragedy, what makes tragedy work? We'll have another video on that. I'm not going to get into it now, but Aristotle, he came up with this framework as a mode of evaluation to say what makes for a good work of literature and what makes a work for a bad work of literature. And that's a kind of prescriptive kind of theory. Not all theory is prescriptive. Not all theory is attached to evaluating works. Some is, and Aristotle certainly is. But Aristotle also gives us a whole vocabulary for thinking about narrative and representation that has continued to influence literary theory into the 21st century. So theory gives us categories and frameworks to describe features of texts, like narrators and characters and poetic devices. It also can tell us how and why texts are made and used, right? For Aristotle, the purpose of tragedy was to make you feel better. It had a kind of medical effect. You'd go watch a tragedy and you'd cry and you'd purge those negative emotions and then get back to your business, right? It also can tell us what texts readers, authors even are, right? It can really kind of mess with our sense of what makes a text. A few years back, Bob Dylan, a popular songwriter, was given the Nobel Prize for Literature. And obviously this entailed a kind of sense of literature as being something different than what they might have thought literature was 100 years ago. And theory can also give us ways of theories. Theory gives us theories. Theory can give us ways of thinking about how texts relate to broader cultural and social contexts, right? What does Shakespeare's theater, his plays, say about, beliefs, opinions, politics, religion, social customs at the time when he was writing? How can we use texts to think about that, right? That's the next theoretical level, is asking, well, what do we expect out of the relationship between the text and the world, right? How do we go about looking at a text in order to find the information that we want from it? And so this then brings us to this diagram that I've come up with here. Actually, this is modified from my colleague, Jim Baumlin, here at Missouri State University, who talks about this as the rhetorical triangle. And this is a bit of an adaptation of it into a kind of a communications model, where we have a text, right? Be it a song, a poem, a novel, that is written in a code, in a sense, the English language, a genre, and so on and so forth. Everything that is formally part of a text is part of the specific text itself and the code that it's embodied in. And the author, we can think of as the encoder, right? The person who takes something that they have to say and puts it into words. And then the decoder, or the reader, kind of then interprets this. And both of them have a relationship to the text, right? The meaning of the text belongs in some sense to sorry, new critics. It belongs in some sense to the author. The author has something to do with the meaning of the text, but so does the reader. And next week, we're going to talk about reader response criticism and reception theory, which is very interested in the way that the activity of readers produces the meanings of texts. And then finally, up here, there's this broad category at this point of the triangle that also informs the meaning of the text, which is the world. That is everything that we experience, our social world, the scientific world. It's how we relate. It's the world we live in, basically. The world includes other texts. It includes other people. It includes religions and cultures and practices and scientific theories and history and everything else. And that is going to inform the meaning of the text. If you're reading a short story that's set in the 1920s in Ireland, then in some sense, what was actually happening in the 1920s in Ireland has to do with the meaning of that text. And so when you're working with theory, each school of literary theory, each critical approach offers different ways of thinking about the relationship between the text, its makers, its users, and the world to which it belongs. And different critical approaches will prioritize different aspects of it and conceive of the relationship of these different elements in different ways. We talked about new criticism already, which obviously says that, oh no, it's just the text. The text alone is where you get the meaning. But we're going to talk about reader response theory, which is very interested in the activity of readers. Archetypal criticism is interested in a whole world of meaning and culture outside of the text. Psychoanalytical criticism is interested in the minds of authors and readers, and so on and so forth. There's a number of different approaches to literature that will look at different elements of this. Obviously, feminism, gender studies, and queer theory is interested in what texts authors and readers have to say about the experience of being in a world where gender matters and where our own understanding of our bodies and our experience in our bodies is crucial for how we make and use art and communicate with each other. So this is just a brief overview of what literary theory is, why it's important, how we'll use it, and most important, I wanted to introduce this triangle for you as a kind of meta theory, as a way of comparing different literary theories. As we move through each of these, well, we're going to refer back to this model to think about how different critical approaches to literature, different theories, view, see, theorize, frame, approach the relationship between text, author, reader, and world. Thank you for listening. Have a great day. If you're not one of my students, like and subscribe. Bye.